Happy Monday afternoon to you. Everybody driving around Houston right now, especially if you're up in the north suburbs, pay particular attention to what we're about to talk about. I know we have a lot of listeners in the Woodlands and Conroe and just the north side of Houston. You guys have one of the most famous congressmen in America. This is a guy that appeared on this radio show when he was first running for Congress against Kathy Wall. Y'all remember Kathy Wall? We made fun of Kathy Wall. She had a high-pitched voice. She sounded nasally. We're like, wait, that's the politician? And she was running against this guy who looked good on paper. Dan Crenshaw, military veteran, considered to be a war hero, and campaigned as a proud conservative, cut in the same cloth as the op-ed editor at nationalreview.com. We were told that Dan Crenshaw was a staunch conservative. You guys remember when he was publicly attacked on Saturday Night Live, and then Pete Davidson, Kim Kardashian's boyfriend, weird saying that out loud, issued a public apology, and suddenly Dan Crenshaw became a national figure. He wasn't just some congressman from Texas. He was one of the most, sort of like the AOC of the Republican Party, and I mean that in the best and worst way, right? A mainstream name in politics that everybody's familiar with, but not somebody who's always the brightest, most articulate person in politics. Very recently, Dan Crenshaw decided that he was going to vote yes on spending $400 million for a government database of the vaccinated. Now, this is a guy on social media who's very critical of things like vaccine mandates and vaccine passports. And whatever your opinions are on that, I'm sure you would agree, saying that you're against vaccine passports and vaccine mandates while simultaneously telling us that we need a national database of the vaccinated that should cost hundreds of millions of dollars feels a little bit like a contradiction, right? I mean, I don't like Bernie Sanders or AOC, but at least they admit what they are. Dan Crenshaw is not the staunch conservative we've been told. He appeared on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah just as recently as last month to say that it's time that Republicans take climate change seriously. Now, does that sound like somebody from the oil and gas capital of the world, much less a Republican? He said this more than once. He's still got tweets on his publicly viewed Twitter account from August 2019, where he talks about how we have to consider red flag laws. Now, we feel like we were stabbed in the back by Dan Crenshaw. A lot of our listeners do. I get emails, I get tweets. Anytime Dan does something that raises an eyebrow in the conservative movement, I get 1,000 emails about it because the people that live in his district listen to this radio show. A lot of you either heard about him for the first time on this radio show or from the host right across the hall from here, Mr. Michael Berry. Whoever it was that told you about Dan Crenshaw, both me and Michael and pretty much everybody in our little circle, we're starting to wonder why do we endorse this guy? Why do we campaign for somebody who sold himself as a Ted Cruz and turned out to be a John McCain or a Mitt Romney? Anyway, until recently, we didn't think it mattered. I mean, without a primary opponent, does it matter? What's the point of complaining about a bad lawmaker that doesn't have a primary opponent? He didn't have a primary opponent until, a few days ago, until just this past week, when a guy from the Woodlands named Jameson Ellis decided he was going to file to challenge this guy. Now, if you've never heard of this guy, you're going to meet him right now. I got him on hold as we speak. Jameson, how are you doing, brother?
I'm doing absolutely wonderful. I definitely want to say appreciate you having me on the show.
All right. Let's start off with this. Who are you?
Yeah, so my name is Jameson Ellis, and I actually live in Conroe. I live in the southeastern tip of Conroe that is now inside of Congressional District 2, and I'm a small business owner. I'm self-employed, and so I do brand design, brand management, digital marketing, web design, graphic design, and I've been doing that for, I guess, the last decade or so. And and so I'm just a patriot. I'm a normal, average, everyday guy. I help run a nonprofit called Bridge the Blue, where we help to try to bridge the gap between law enforcement and community. That's actually where all of this started. And so, May 25th is a very significant date for two reasons. One, it's my birthday. Second reason is because May 25th of 2020 is the day that the George Floyd incident happened. And over the next 60 days, we saw over 500 declared riots and over 2,000 law enforcement officers that were injured in the line of duty. And our government leaders just sat on their butts. They didn't do anything. Some of them actually incited even more violence. And so we were in the middle of what we call the Blue Crew Live. And I felt like, I'm a Christian, right? So I felt like I heard the voice of God just tell me what's going on with law enforcement is a symptom of a much deeper issue. And so in that moment, I knew that I wanted to do more. I knew that I wanted to maybe run for office, but I'm not a politician. So I didn't even know what my next step was going to be. A couple of weeks later, I got a Facebook message from a gal that lives out of Wichita Falls. I don't know her. She doesn't know me. And she's a good, godly lady. And she said, hey, I wanted to share something with you. Had a dream about you, saw you in Congress, and it's been on your heart, and you haven't told anybody. And she was absolutely correct. I hadn't even told my wife. So that night I told my wife about it, and we kind of put it on the back burner and said, okay, God, we're going to trust you for the next step. Well, fast forward, and that was July of 2020. Fast forward to this year, about March or April, I get a call from my buddy John, who's been in politics for a while, and he's done campaigns, and he asked me, he said, hey, did you know that Kevin Brady's not running for re-election? And I said, no, I didn't know that. Long story short, I made the decision that was my time to jump in. So we started off in Congressional District 8. And then after the gerrymandering was completed, and I looked at the redistricting maps, I wound up being in Congressional District 2. So I tell people all the time, I didn't switch districts, the district switched me. And so, and I can't even begin to tell you, like, I didn't set out in this race to primary Dan Crenshaw. I actually set out in this race to run in the district that I lived in, which was 8. And so, here we are. We're living in 2. And as a man of principle, I believe that a congressman needs to represent the district in which they live. And so if I'm going to be a man of principle, I said, well, I need to run in 2 now. And the number of people that have come up to me and have said, we've been praying for somebody to come along and primary Dan Crenshaw. Like, thank you for doing this. It's been kind of wild because I didn't set out to primary Dan Crenshaw, right? It just by luck, I guess, or by happenstance. But again, being a Christian, I don't believe that happened by accident. And I believe that we're in this race for a reason.
Okay, so a lot to unpack there. I think that's very interesting. Let's start off with the first thing you just said to me that really struck me as fascinating. A woman you never met before from Wichita Falls, a cute town a little west of Fort Worth, contacted you to tell you she had a dream about you. Now, this am I understanding that right? That God spoke to her and said that you should be running for Congress. Is that what you're saying?
God spoke to her and she saw me in Congress, and she knew that had been on my heart, even though I hadn't told anybody.
And when she said that to you, it touched a note. You didn't just think she was some insane person. You thought, wait, maybe I should run.
Yeah, no, correct. I mean, and I have to understand, I'm not a politician, right? So I'm just a regular guy that felt like I wanted to do something more, and actually have a desire to do something more. And so whenever she told me this, I'm a firm believer that if you're the men that are secure, they know that it's okay to cry, right? And so I'm secure in my masculinity. So whenever I read that message, and as we were talking, I was just like, I bawled my eyes out, because to me it was just confirmation that okay, this is actually what I'm being called to do. And so, yeah, it was pretty crazy to say the least, though. I mean, I still get goosebumps thinking about it sometimes.
Have you spoken to that woman since then?
On a couple of different occasions, yes.
All right. And this isn't just like a woman that's trying to get you to leave your wife or something like that. This is I'm just making sure. I just want to, because it's unique. That's an interesting reason to run for office. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, she is an older woman, and she used to be part of the Cruz campaign. And so, but no, she's definitely not trying to pull me away from my wife.
Okay, well, good. Look, I think Ted Cruz has done a fantastic job of being a lawmaker, one of the best in Texas. And when we looked at Dan Crenshaw, that was what we thought we were going to get. It's not what we got, is it?
No, not at all. And as a matter of fact, in the race that I was in Congressional District 8, I knew that my 2 biggest opponents were going to be Morgan Luttrell and Jonathan Houlihan. And so with Luttrell, I knew that he was a Rick Perry guy, and I knew that he was being backed by Dan Crenshaw. And so I actually had two battles that I had to win. I had to link Crenshaw to Luttrell. So the only way that I could really attack Luttrell, because he doesn't have a voting record, he doesn't have, so the only way that I could really attack Luttrell at that point, or to expose Luttrell, if you will, was to expose Crenshaw. So I had already begun exposing Crenshaw whenever I was in Congressional District 8, to tie Luttrell back to Crenshaw, that, hey, if you're not happy with the job that Crenshaw is doing, you're probably not going to be happy with the job that Luttrell is going to do.
I have so much I want to ask you about that, but we got to take a quick break. Jameson Ellis, running for office right now against Dan Crenshaw in the Republican primary. Can you hang with us for a minute? Do you need to go anywhere?
No, absolutely. I'm here.
All right, quick commercial break. Meet the candidate, Jameson Ellis, Dan Crenshaw's primary opponent. Don't change the channel. We'll be right back.
Kenny Webster, the best looking dude on radio. And if you've seen the competition, that's not saying a whole hell of a lot.
Welcome back. It's been a very interesting day so far. It's only Monday, and already this has been a fascinating week. Build Back Better is buried. It's a lot of B's. Say that 10 times fast. Joe Manchin coming out and really upsetting Democrats. I noticed something. When you're outside of the place where these guys were elected, Joe Manchin is very unpopular with Democrats. And Dan Crenshaw, our local congressman from here in Houston, appears to be admired by those very same people. If you're critical of Dan Crenshaw on Twitter, all of a sudden, you'll notice that a lot of the replies you get from people defending him are anonymous accounts operated by Democrats. I find that very interesting. When I criticize Dan Crenshaw, and I have a handful of times, very rarely are the people that disagree with me Republican. They're almost always liberal Democrats. I thought, boy, that reminds me of somebody. Well, it reminds me of a couple people. Mitt Romney, John McCain. Is Dan Crenshaw basically just Texas's version of John McCain? And where is his political career going from here? People in the suburbs of Houston who have elected conservatives for years looked at Dan Crenshaw as the next generation. He's a millennial. He and I are about the same age. He was supposed to be the next generation of small government, Tea Party-inspired political values for people in the greater Houston area. I think he actually has an annual youth summit for young conservatives, which is interesting, right? Because you wouldn't think that somebody who is a young conservative would advocate for things like red flag laws, but Dan Crenshaw did. Dan Crenshaw still has the tweets up. August 2019. Said something very interesting here on Twitter. If you'd like to look it up, August 4th, 2019, Dan Crenshaw said in the response to a mass shooting at a school, he said, "The solutions aren't obvious, even if we pretend they are, but we must try. Let's start with the TAPS Act. Maybe also implement state red flag laws or gun violence restraining orders. Stop them before they can hurt someone." This is the staunch conservative, the Republican from Houston, Texas, supporting gun control efforts. Now, he's done a lot since then to try to backtrack on this, suggesting he's against red flag laws, but he never took the tweet down. Now, he's got a challenger. Mr. Jameson Ellis is a local activist and entrepreneur from the north suburbs who, if you're just tuning in, I've been talking to him. And one of the things that struck me as interesting recently about Dan Crenshaw is going out and campaigning for two guys that I don't think seem like bad political candidates. The only thing that I wonder about them is their association with Dan Crenshaw. Wesley Hunt, been on this show, has had a lot of great answers to political questions and policy positions that I happen to agree with. And the other one was Marcus Luttrell's brother, Morgan. Now, until recently, I just thought of those guys as being conservatives and small government advocates. But as a lot of you know, Dan Crenshaw, not long ago, was doing a campaign event here in Houston. I think it was just a couple weeks ago, appearing with Wesley Hunt and Morgan Luttrell. And I felt really bad for Wesley when this happened, as Morgan is sitting on stage with Wesley and with Dan in between the two of them. Dan decides it's a good time to start criticizing the Freedom Caucus, the conservatives, the small government advocates from places like Texas and throughout the country. And if you're just tuning on the radio, Jameson Ellis, the opponent to Dan Crenshaw, said one of the reasons why he was publicly attacking Dan Crenshaw is he thought he was going to run against Morgan Luttrell, who had no voting record. Jameson, you see Morgan and Wesley as being kind of like Dan?
Yeah, and so I've known since June that Luttrell was being endorsed by Crenshaw, and because he made it basically public on his Twitter, and there seems to be this movement of Navy SEALs that are sticking together, and they're relying on their service in our military. And I just want to say this, because I think this is important that everybody needs to understand that I fully respect and honor people like Morgan Luttrell and Dan Crenshaw, their service as Navy SEALs to our country. That's not in question. And we need to stop looking at that as a reason why we're going to vote for somebody. We need to start looking at who they are as a person. We need to start looking at well, in the case of Dan Crenshaw, let's look at his service to our nation in Congress. So that is something that I do not honor and support. So you can support one and not the other. And we need to make sure that people understand that. It doesn't make you less patriotic simply because you don't like their performance and the way they represent the district in DC. And so that's like I said, the military service isn't in question. So with Luttrell, I knew back in June that he was being endorsed by Crenshaw, and that's kind of what threw the red flag for me. And so I knew that I had to expose Dan Crenshaw and link him back to Luttrell if I was going to have any chance of winning Congressional District 8. So.
All right. Now, you are officially filed. You're registered. You're an official candidate. You're going to appear on the primary ballot coming up in the spring, in March, presumably. I think it sounds like the primaries might get delayed because of the legal dispute over the new congressional district. But sooner or later, there's going to be a primary, and you're on that ticket, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How is campaigning and how's fundraising going for you? You're challenging a guy who's got millions of dollars to spend on political ads.
Yep. Well, what's interesting about that, and I'll answer that question here in a second. So what's interesting about that is that he's got about 4.6. Well, as of the other day, I think I saw it's 4.4 million cash on hand. Interestingly enough, only 0.65% of that money actually comes from inside the district. The majority of the money that he raises comes from outside the district. And besides Texas, the three states where the majority of his funding comes from is California and New York, two of the most liberal states in the union, and Florida. So when it comes to the fundraising on our end, so we have raised about $25,000, most of which comes from within the district. And whenever we sat out back in May or June, we started out with building a grassroots team. We wanted to lay a foundation first, because that's half the battle, right? Having volunteers that can go out and represent you whenever you're somewhere else, or they can go and knock on doors and just be advocates for your campaign, that's equally as important. And not only that, but we are true fiscal conservatives. And so the majority of the stuff that people are spending thousands of dollars on, things like social media, their website, their graphic designs, their advertising, I do it all myself. So out of my own pocket, I have spent over $60,000 worth of services just on my own digital campaign. And so I like to point that out. So if we can do something in-house to save that money, then we're going to do it. And so with the $25,000 that we've raised, we made a pretty big impact. And so we had our relaunch rally last Saturday at Liberty on the Lake at Lake Houston Brewery, and we had about 250 to 300 people there throughout the night. We had Forgiato Blow and Bryson Gray, as well as Peyton Howie, and it was a really, really fun event. And we raised about $15,000 just with that one event. So the grassroots is really showing up for us in a really big way. And we've woken a lot of people up, and it's just a matter of sharing Crenshaw's voting record, because with some people, there's this cognitive dissonance that goes on where they're like shocked. They're like, I had no idea. But eventually they come around, and we're starting to learn that the majority of people in the new congressional district 2, the Democrats that are in Harris County, what what nobody's taking into consideration is that those Democrats were Trump voters, and Crenshaw did not support Trump. And I've got a video right now that's circulating nationwide that is a fundraiser that he did in Chicago, Illinois back in August, where he's at a fundraiser and he's telling a group full of conservatives that, was there some voter fraud? Sure, maybe. Enough that Trump lost the election illegitimately? Absolutely not. And if you believe that, you're kidding yourself.
Jameson, how are you doing on time? Can you hang out and do another segment with us?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're just turning on your radio, we're talking to Jameson Ellis. He is challenging Dan Crenshaw in the upcoming election, in the primaries happening in March. And if you have questions, call the show right now, 713-212-5950. I got a few more things I'd like to ask him before we're done.
Everything you've heard is a lie. Well, unless you heard it from the mouth of Kenny Webster. All facts. Even the bit about his little Kenny.
Hey!
Oh, sorry, bro. I mean, Big Kenny. You're listening to Kenny Webster's Pursuit of Happiness.
This is Pursuit of Happiness Radio.
As we all know, there is a downside to freedom of speech.
Pursuit of Happiness Radio.
In America, you have a right to be stupid.
Pursuit of Happiness Radio.
This is America, and in America, if something sucks, you're supposed to be able to get your money back.
This is Pursuit of Happiness Radio.
Oh, we're back. Kenny Webster here. Thanks so much for tuning in. It is a Monday afternoon. A lot of people contacted us on the Walton and Johnson show this morning. They said, aren't you guys on vacation? No, we're not on vacation. We refuse to take vacation. Honestly, I just don't have anything else to do this week. But my wife has to work, so I figure I might as well come in and do the show. But it doesn't matter. It is a love that I do this. It is a passion, and it is great to be here with you guys this afternoon. Now, if you're just turning on your radio, I'm having a very interesting conversation with somebody I think a lot of you are going to like, somebody a lot of you are going to enjoy. A handful of you, probably at least 1 in 10 of you, are probably going to hate this guy. Now, I say that as somebody, I'm so far impressed by what I've heard from this person. Jameson Ellis is challenging Dan Crenshaw in the upcoming primary for District 2 here in Texas. I remember vividly 4 years ago being very excited about Dan Crenshaw. And since then, Dan Crenshaw has done a few things, right? First, there was the red flag laws. Then he made a comment about climate change. He said it's time for conservatives to start taking climate change more seriously. Since then, he's backtracked on a lot of these things. But as my guest right now has just explained to you, back during the year 2020, there were a lot of riots in America. It was becoming a daily thing. June 1st, 2020, I vividly remember Antifa and Black Lives Matter and La Raza and all those other crazy grassroots, basically domestic terror groups, occupying Washington, D.C., burning statues, tearing the city down, doing billions of dollars worth of damage all over the country. And it was like the media didn't even notice. January 6th came, and suddenly the liberal media cared about riots again. Suddenly they were very concerned about public safety, law and order. That's weird. You guys loved anarchy and chaos back when Trump was president, but now that it looks like there's a changing of the guards, you've changed your decision about that. You've changed your mind. After January 6th happened, I'll never forget Dan Crenshaw blaming Donald Trump for the riots. Now, since then, Liz Cheney and what's the other guy's name? Adam Kinzinger, 2 congressmen from the Republican Party who were on the committee for January 6th, trying to investigate Trump, trying to prove that Trump and the people that surround him are responsible for that riot that day. Now, if that had been a liberal protest, MSNBC would have called it a mostly peaceful demonstration. Republicans were involved. It's a very different position. And as my guest was just explaining to you guys, Dan Crenshaw blames Trump and Trump's supporters for what happened at the Capitol on January 6th last year. Now, whatever you think of QAnon, that's one thing, but to try to suggest that Donald Trump is responsible, a guy whose last post on social media was telling people to stop rioting, it feels like it's a bit disingenuous, doesn't it, Jameson Ellis?
Yes, absolutely. The fact of the matter is that, Trump was very specific about what he was saying. And and I want to make sure that I point this out because I think this is important because we're talking about having a true conservative, a true liberty-loving conservative in office. So a lot of people, especially Republicans, mostly Republicans, want to blame Democrats for everything that's going on. I don't blame Democrats because Democrats are Democrats. They're always going to act and vote like Democrats. The problem that I have is with Republicans like Dan Crenshaw who act and vote like Democrats. And so we have 435 voting members of the House. Less than 40 of those have true conservative representation. And then and here in Texas, we always say, keep Texas red. And I hate to break it to anybody. Texas ain't red. It's purple. 36 districts. I know we just added 2, but 36 districts here in Texas, less than 13 have true conservative representation. So the issue is not Democrats. The issue is rhinos. It's fake Republicans that won't stand up and be Republicans. And Dan Crenshaw is one of those. And when you look at somebody like Louis Gohmert, who is a hero of mine, he stood for Trump. When you look at somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene in Georgia, who's doing a phenomenal job, she stood with Trump. But then you look at somebody like Dan Crenshaw, and he blames Trump.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I blame Trump for is for waking people up to the tyranny that big government has become. So.
Well put, my friend. I love Louis Gohmert. I think I was very excited to learn that he was running for Texas Attorney General. Louis Gohmert, Chip Roy, Jim Jordan, Clay Higgins of Louisiana, formerly Captain Clay Higgins, the police chief, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert. These are the people in the Freedom Caucus. And Dan Crenshaw has told us that they're the problem, that they're just repeating slogans they hear off of bumper stickers. He's claiming they didn't do enough to support Donald Trump, especially early on. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so a couple of months ago, and I don't have the exact date in front of me, but I made a social media post about it. It's on Twitter. So a couple of months ago, Crenshaw admits that he's a performance artist. He's like, I can't claim that I'm not a performance artist, and I'm paraphrasing. I can't claim that I'm not a performance artist because I jump out of airplanes for campaign videos.
Right.
And then a couple of weeks ago turns around and says that we have performance artists, and then we have legislators, we have grifters in our midst, and he's talking about the House Freedom Caucus. So literally what we have here is we have people so focused on what his right hand is doing that they're not paying attention to what his left hand is doing, and he's got the wool pulled over so many people's eyes.
Yeah. You and I have a lot of mutual friends. Chase Cormier is the helicopter pilot who was seriously injured right after the pandemic began here in Houston, Texas. Some people think that people shot down that helicopter. There were a lot of suspicious details involving that investigation. Charlie Diggs, one of the biggest country music promoters in America. Peyton Howie, the upcoming country singer, recently appeared with you at, what'd you call it, Liberty on the Lake. And,
Liberty on the Lake.
And headlining that event, the guy that wrote the Let's Go Brandon rap song that beat out Adele on Spotify and Apple Music. Look, these are pretty big names. These are people that come out and support you. You're getting support right now from some very big people here in the community. Dan Crenshaw, on the other hand, doesn't really seem that connected to our community right now. He's out hanging out with hosts of HGTV and palling around with Mark Zuckerberg and at doing some conference with far left thought leaders. Does it feel like there's a big disconnect between him and the people in his district?
Yes, 100%. And so, I'm the only candidate that I know of since I have started this back in May that has stood up and has said, don't believe a word that comes out of my mouth.
Wait.
Doubt me every step of the way. Hang. So doubt me every step of the way.
Okay.
Meet with me one-on-one, two-on-one. Host me in your homes. Look me in the eye and know that I am who I say that I am. Ask me the hard questions, and good luck getting Crenshaw to do that.
Well,
and I was doing that in 8. And I'm doing it in 2. Why is that important to me? It's important to me because I want to know what's important to the constituents in the district. And I want them to know that I'm not going to be someone that they hire to represent them in D.C. that's going to make promises that I'm not going to deliver on. I want them to know that I am a man of principle, that I am going to do exactly what I say I'm going to do. And then I'm going to go to D.C., and I'm not going to be politically correct. I'm going to be patriotically correct.
Jameson Ellis, do you want to do one more segment with us, or do you need to run?
No, absolutely. I'm enjoying hanging out with you.
Hey, quick break. We'll be right back with more from Dan Crenshaw's only primary opponent. Don't change the channel.
According to a new report, exaggerated statements are up by like 1 billion%. And now more of the highest rated show on radio, Kenny Webster's Pursuit of Happiness.
If you are just tuning in, I've been talking to Representative Dan Crenshaw's primary opponent, a guy by the name of Jameson Ellis. Jameson is a local conservative activist. He is very politically involved. He is from the Conroe area, home of Southern Star Brewing Company. If Jameson is as good as Southern Star Brewing Company, he has got my vote. But it doesn't matter what I think. I live down here in the city. We're really doing this for those of you that live up in District 2. I always want people to understand it's not that Abbott or Crenshaw or John Cornyn, it's not that they're completely 100% awful. But every 4 years, every 2 years, every 6 years, depending on the candidate, you have a chance, and depending on what position they're in, you have a chance to reconsider if this person is the best person to represent your party. Right now, it is primary time. We criticize Governor Abbott a lot on this radio show. And people will ask me, they're like, well, Kenny, what do you want, a Democrat? What do you want, Beto O'Rourke? No, I want a Republican who acts like a conservative or acts more liberty-minded. Somebody that's cut from the same cloth as a Ted Cruz or a Rand Paul. And I assume that most of you guys want that as well. We get emails about it all the time. Right now, somebody like that, or somebody who claims to be like that, we certainly hope he's like that, is on the line right now. Mr. Jameson Ellis challenging Dan Crenshaw. Jameson, I used to have Dan on this show regular. Before anybody knew who Dan Crenshaw was, he was on this radio show. I used to do a podcast with one of the people that ran his office. And one day there was this weird moment where we just sort of got cut off from him, right? It wasn't like it broke our hearts. We didn't care, but we just got the impression all of a sudden we were too conservative and the Crenshaw team didn't want to be associated with us anymore. If you get elected, is there going to be a time when you're going to change your mind about how conservative you are?
No. And so I know it's easy for me to say that, and that's the answer that everybody's expecting to hear. But, and just to kind of give you a quick example. So I've been asked, so if we vote for you and send you to Washington, are you going to vote the way that the district wants you to vote? And that's kind of a loaded question, right? Because ultimately where my mind goes to the place of, okay, well, what happens? Because a lot of people are moving here from states like California, right? Most of them are going to Austin, but there's a lot of them also moving here as well. And so what happens if the district becomes more moderate, right? Or let's say the district goes straight up liberal and we have a lot of socialists living in the district. And here I am in DC representing the district and they want me to vote for something that's socialist. Well, I will not do that. So one of the things that I tell people is that if you vote for me to send me to represent you in DC, it's because you know that I'm a man of principle, and I'm never going to vote to violate the Constitution. I'm never going to vote to increase spending. I'm never going to vote to hurt small businesses. I'm a firm believer in Jeffersonian tax principles. I believe we're immorally and overly taxed. And so the reason why people are going to vote for me to send me to DC is because I am a man of principle and I'm not going to budge, and I'm not going to, and what's the word I'm looking for here? Compromise.
Compromise. Yeah.
I don't believe in compromise. Good cannot compromise with evil. And I also believe that compromise is what people default to so they don't have to engage in great negotiation. It's often said that the person that offers to meet you in the middle is a poor judge of distance. And so I will not compromise.
I love it, man. Dan Crenshaw recently voted yes on $400 million worth of spending for a COVID vaccine database. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that is an infringement on our constitutional rights. I believe it's an infringement on our privacy. And here's what he's hiding from everybody. And I think that this is important, is he claims that it was, 50 or whatever, it was spearheaded or being led by 50 Republicans. What he's failing to mention is that they weren't Republicans. They were rhinos, number one. Number two, he's failing to look at the fact that this was sponsored by Ann Custer, who was out in New Hampshire, who was one of the most liberal members of the House out of New Hampshire. And if you go back and you look at what her reasoning for sponsoring this bill was, which Crenshaw's not going to tell you about, it's scary. And so literally what we're dealing with here is we're dealing with a globalist agenda, where they're trying to dissolve America from the inside out, to make this global government, if you will. And I don't know what it looks like. I don't subscribe to Q or anything like that, but there is this globalist reality that they are trying to infiltrate America, where we lose our sovereignty. And when you look at our open borders, that's exactly what's happening. It's an invasion, and we're being invaded and destroyed from the inside out. I don't like how disingenuous he has been in representing why he supported the bill. And I think that people are understanding that. People are seeing that, as if $400 million, by the way, wasn't enough reason to vote no on it.
Huh. That was what I thought, too. I mean, if you started the sentence with, we're going to spend $400 million on, I would say, stop right there. I don't want you to spend the money. The rest of the sentence is even more insane, that it was spent on a COVID vaccine database. Jameson Ellis, you must have events coming up. You must be doing campaigning. I'm sure what's going on? If people want to get involved, if people want to support you, how do they find out? Where do they go? What should they do?
Yeah, so we're on all the social media. So we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Getter. I just recently started using Getter, and we've been building a lot of momentum on there. We're on Instagram and Telegram. And then my website is jamesonellis.com, JAMESON, just like the Irish whiskey, except I think I'm a lot more fun personally. But JAMESONELLIS.com. And what I would encourage everybody to do is to read my website, look at my priorities, look at what I'm fighting for. And then at the very bottom of the page is a place where you can put your first name and your email address. Subscribe to follow the campaign, and you'll be kept up to date with all of the events that we're going to be doing, as well as you'll be receiving a few emails directly from me on where I stand on very specific issues that are very important to everybody. We're talking about topics like the riots and like the defunding of police. We're also I'm also talking about things like critical race theory, talking about things like the spending, right, or the debt clock, the fact that people think that we're only $30 trillion, and I say only $30 trillion in debt, because the reality is we have over $200 trillion in promised benefits. And any candidate or politician that steps on stage or steps on a platform and says, I have a plan to fix it, they are lying to you. That is $200 trillion and promised benefits that we just don't have. And so I'm not gonna make false promises. I believe we're going to be headed for a course correction, and I don't know that there's any way out of that. But subscribe to updates and on the campaign, and you'll get access to all of that information.
All right, this is a very controversial question. You know, you're from Texas. You wear a cowboy hat. Who is your favorite country singer?
That is kind of a heated question. I can give you a few.
Sure, go ahead.
So I'm a huge George Strait fan. I love Brooks and Dunn. Little Texas. I love Little Texas. Confederate Railroad is another. I love 90s country. And Kenny Chesney. I love me some Kenny Chesney. Not new stuff, but like 2000 stuff. I don't know. I've got a playlist that has over 16 hours of rebel country, 90s country, 80s country, and 2000s country, and there's way too many to name. But if I was going to be stuck on a desert island and I could choose one country artist, it'd probably be King George.
You didn't say Peyton Howie though in that list.
Peyton Howie, yeah, no. So Peyton, if you're hearing this, I'm so sorry. No, Peyton is amazing. So I one of the reasons why I wanted her to come. I first heard her whenever I was at the Big Top Vintage Market in Conroe, not this past year, but last year. And I heard her singing a song, and I'm a musician myself, right? So I listen to the pitches of people, and I listen to how they pronounce words and everything. And all of a sudden I hear Peyton singing, and I had no idea who she is, right? So I go and I leave the booth and I go listen to her, and I'm like, she has a dang good voice. And luckily she came over to our Bridge the Blue booth, and I got to talk to her and I got connected with her. And as soon as I knew that we were going to have Bryson Gray and Forgiato Blow playing at our event, I wanted to make sure that I reached out to her and said, hey, I would love to give you an opportunity to get in front of possibly even a new audience to try to help. And she came and she absolutely just charmed everyone. And so, no, she is amazing.
All right, before we run out of time, we think she's great too. We had her at a police charity event we recently did up in Grimes County. One more very controversial question. You live in Conroe, you got some great towns, some great barbecue places over there. You want brisket, you're getting in your truck or whatever you drive. Where are you going to get brisket and pork belly?
Yeah, this is controversial because it ain't going to be anywhere here. So I'm initially, so I was born in Brady, Texas. And so Brady, Texas is my favorite barbecue restaurant called Max Barbecue. I have never found a true Texas barbecue restaurant like Max Barbecue that even compares.
And it's not in Houston. There's another place in Houston called Mad Max Barbecue. That's not what it is.
No, this is in Brady, Texas. So Brady, Texas is the geographical center of Texas. It's actually known as the heart of Texas, and that's my hometown. And Max Barbecue, MAC''S Barbecue. Max Barbecue is in Brady, Texas, and bar none, favorite barbecue joint.
Honestly, the only reason I ask people that question, I just want to see if they're going to say Dickies or Rudy's or something like. But you did good on both of those questions. I didn't get Florida Georgia Line or Chili's as an answer. I trust you. JamesonEllis.com is the website. Find him on Twitter at the Jameson Ellis. Go to JamesonEllis.com. I think this is a worthy challenger for Dan Crenshaw. All I'm asking is that you consider him if you live in the voting district.
We're not passive aggressive. Like some people we know, this is Kenny Webster's Pursuit of Happiness.